So, how did you get started on this path of Mystica? Where does this energy come from, and why do you do what you do online?
Well, that's a good question. Very oddly, my first spiritual awakening was when I was 8 years old,
Wow.
and I was in the woods of Alaska walking down a trail that my dad told me never to walk down. And it's like so isolated, no city noise, nothing. And I was just walking down this trail. I had not been practicing like spiritual practices or nothing. I was a typical 8 year old playing with Star Wars figures and things. So I walked out on this trail one day, and this personality, this identity, it just disappeared. And I was just there in existence. And I felt that I was the earth and I was the forest. And I remember a bird was chirping, and I felt like I was the bird. The bird noise was coming from me. So I don't know how long this lasted. My guesstimation is maybe about 10 minutes. I was in some kind of samadhi or something. And then I started to hear my dad calling me. And that pulled me back into this ego, this identity, and like, oh, I have a role to play, and I'm Billy, and I'm supposed to do this and be this, and I'm not supposed to be on this trail. And I went back home. I tried to explain to my parents what happened, and it kind of got me in some trouble because they thought I was making up some big story. So fast forward a bit, in my teenage years, I got heavily into alcohol, drugs. I had 5 major addictions. I was a criminal, stole a police car, drove it to Florida. You
Wow.
know, I was a mess. And it wasn't until the year 2000, I would have been about 28 years old, that this thing happened to me again. And
Mm.
at that point, being an adult and being fed up with suffering, I investigated what this was, and that became the Path of Mystica.
Oh. And it just happened? It was just like a stroke of grace?
Yes and no. In 2000, I was working at a CD store selling music, and I was also playing in my own band, and I was kind of living the lifestyle. I was single, and um, you know, had a lot of connections and things I was making. So I was living the human experience life. But I was still suffering. I still had all these addictions I was dealing with. One day I went into uh, the bookstore next to the music store, and there was this book called Reflections of the Christ Mind. And I had already let go of Christianity and everything at that point, but there was something about that book that just like opened up that space in my heart. And I bought the book, went home, probably read it all in 2 days, and then was like, holy shit, this is exactly what I experienced when I was 8 years old. I am that.
Yeah. You are the Christ mind?
Yes. And we all are. And we just get lost in the ego mind, or whatever we want to call it, Maya, or.
Mm-hmm. How would you explain to somebody what that means if they have no idea what the hell we're talking about right now? How could you explain to somebody that is not tapped into the yogic lifestyle what that means to be on the wavelength of the Christ mind?
I would say this, and I say this so often, it's I can do it in 60 seconds.
Okay, let's hear it.
You were born and raised, and you were programmed by your parents, by your teachers, by the shows you watch, by the world at large. You were programmed. Some of these programs are very awesome, such as cleanliness and how to cook food and things like that. But maybe 85% of the programs are actually detrimental, which is what creates anxiety, depression, body image issues, addiction. It creates this chasing, this feeling of not being good enough. So we've accumulated all these programs in our lifetime. And spiritual awakening is taking a moment and putting all of that down and seeing what is left. Some people do it by grace. It just happens to them. Some people do it because they're in a car crash and suddenly their whole world gets rocked. And some people do it practicing spiritual practices such as meditation or something. Some people, I would even say, could possibly walk into a church, give their life to Jesus at the altar, and yes, because they are letting completely go of everything, what is left is what we always were. And we could call it spiritual awakening. We could call it returning to our original nature. But for those who have no idea, and trust me, I live in a town where nobody has no idea what I'm talking about half the time. It's just becoming your truest self before the world taught you who to be.
Okay. That's a good synopsis. It's seeing what's real. It's feeling what we actually are, peeling back the layers, and then actually getting to the core of what it really means to be a human being incarnated here, because truly nobody knows. I don't think
Right.
anybody truly knows. And if they do know, they wouldn't be able to just explain it. But you can experience it, right? You can
That's
feel
it.
it. So that's kind of the gist of it. It's like you get to this point or moment in time or moments in time where you feel what that actually is, like that essence, that it's almost like a transmission, like a something turns on in the radio of our mind where just something clicks and says, "Oh, of course. Oh, it's hidden in plain sight the whole time. Oh." It's this aha moment. At least for me, I'm speaking for myself. It's like this. It's a dawning of just it's an enlightenment, I guess you could call it. I mean,
Right.
I don't know. It's just yeah, it's a moment in time where you just see yourself differently than how others see you. Well, not how others see you. I guess yes, how others see you, but how others told you to see yourself from our conditioning as a childhood in
That's
childhood.
it.
Yeah, man. That's a good synopsis.
Yeah, I think what you just said is you know is perfect. It's we can speak in spiritual terms. We could even speak in neuroscientific terms because how it affects the brain and how if someone were to wear, like a brain scan their whole life and they were to go into some type of spiritual awakening, they would see how the brain waves just suddenly just
That's what's
like,
interesting. Yeah, because seeing is believing, especially in our world. So if there is some kind of data or something you can literally show somebody, like, look, here's the difference. It's not I'm just not just speaking craziness. Here's the physiological difference, the neurological difference in somebody's brain. I think that speaks volumes. And is there actually, because I've never actually looked that up. So can you see the difference from like an MRI scan or something like that in somebody's brain? And how do they
yes.
measure that? Like what kind of things do they do to study that?
Um well, I talk about it actually in my book a little bit. Not that I'm a neuroscientist, but I touch upon it. uh, However, Dr. Joe Dispenza has a book called You Are the Placebo, and I'm pretty sure it is in that book that they actually have pictures of the brain scans and things like that. So when the problem is, it's not just that we have been taught a program, we've been taught 1,000 programs. And what happens is, and all of these programs get stirred up when we're in public. This is why a lot of people are antisocial. How they look, how to act, how to be, what's this going on? Is this guy coming at me? What's happening? All of this noise just takes the brain activity so high. It begins to literally send signals to your body of fight or flight, even though there's no reason for it.
I see. Mm,
And in the process of meditation, it's the opposite. We are just observing these brain patterns until they begin to just slow down and dissipate. And what that does for the body is it sends signals is that everything's okay. Your life is perfect. Everything is playing out just as it should. And the more we practice that, the more it begins to shift the brain, and these grooves of these old patterns, they get smoothed over.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah. Hmm. And we are creatures of habit, of pattern. So that's all we got to do is just change our patterns. And that's pretty much like changing our karma. If you want to talk yogically, we're just changing our trajectory toward in this incarnation.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what awakening is to me. It's like first you get the glimpse, you get the feeling, and then it doesn't end there. That's just the beginning, I see. Then you have a lot of stuff that we all have to do in order to be on that wavelength. And it is a reconditioning process, and it takes time. It takes discipline, and it takes a genuine um I don't know if it's want, but it's like a genuine, earnest, just goal oriented lifestyle. Like there's something that we have to do. I mean, technically there's nothing that we ever have to do, right, in the ultimate. But in order to retain that, in my opinion, in order to retain that viewpoint and that perspective on ourselves, there are things that we have to do to navigate the illusion of Maya, of Prakriti, this way of life. And it's how we, it's how we navigate our physical manifestations in this way of life, like how we, where we live. Like you live on a bus, it's or we just simplify our life and the people that we associate ourselves with and the practices that we do, and that then thus changes our brain, our neuro wiring essentially, and then
Yes,
from there changes our life, because the mind is all. So it is a process. It's like a science in a way.
it is. No, I think everything you just said resonates with the same things that I say to people, that yes, by grace, we could say grace does it all, but also there has to be this earnestness there, this diligence.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I said on my TikTok live yesterday. Somebody was talking about this. I said, if you want to change your body, you put this poster up on your wall, of Arnold Schwarzenegger or, whoever. And you can't just look at it, like a picture of, Eckhart Tolle or Ramana or, anybody. You can't just look at it, even though there is a power in looking at it.
Mm-hmm. It's a
You,
reminder.
you a reminder. You have to create this discipline, this diligence within you, whether it's through yoga or any other type of practice. This diligence that if your goal is this body, then you get into the gym and you work your ass off. If your goal, and you can have both goals at the same time, but if your goal is to wake up to who you really are, then you're going to have to find something that resonates with you, a book or teaching, something, and you practice it diligently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's no other way in the human mind. Like you have to have diligence. And it's funny because in our way of living in our world, it's becoming rarer and rarer every day that goes by, having that discipline and being able to just simply focus on one thing for longer than 60 seconds. It's becoming very rare to be able to do that in most individuals, and it's because of technology, and it's because of the constant conditionings. The conditionings don't stop. you know,
Yeah,
the influencers are they're still there. They're still in our pocket, literally. So it's ever more so important to be able to have these practices to be able to stay aligned on that path. And yeah, that's the path to peace, happiness, joy, contentment. So who doesn't want that?
it is. It is. And it's a choice. And one thing you said a moment ago about spiritual awakening, you're catching that glimpse. And I talk about this all the time. Sometimes people think the glimpse itself is the totality of it. And then they get lost in the glimpse and they say, yeah, I had a spiritual awakening, but now my life sucks. And then I say, well, we catch a glimpse. And if we stay in that glimpse, our life can really appear to suck worse than it did before, because now but then nothing is happening. And so this glimpse. So my book was a total vision. If I could tell the story about that for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I was watching a Muji video one night, who's a spiritual teacher. I don't know if you've ever heard of him or not, but
Yeah, I love Muji.
yeah. So I was watching Muji one night, and I watched this some of his videos are like crazy long. It was like 3 hours. I watched the whole thing, just sit there and watched it. And all these people would come to the microphone, and Muji would give them this gift, more or less. And then after receiving the gift, they would say, "But now what?" And they were all doing this. They were saying, but now what? But now what? But now what? And, for me sitting there watching this was about 3 years ago. For me sitting there watching this, I just kept saying, there is no now what. You're just back into the mind when you say, but now what? But I felt like I went into this meditation after that, and I felt like it was some kind of prayer to the universe. Like, people need a bridge from that, but now what, to the completion of it.
Yeah.
And that's what became this book, that it just, in that one moment, it's like the whole book just fell into my heart. And of course, it took me a couple weeks to write it out. But probably the most important aspect of this book is the 7 levels of human perception, which is the pathway. It's the roadmap to spiritual awakening. So when we talk about catching a glimpse, this is the glimpse. It's what I call the doorway. It's that moment of stillness where we catch this glimpse. But then we move into spiritual awakening. And then the spiritual awakening at some point has to stabilize. Because if it doesn't stabilize, you're in what I call the awakened loop. It's like you're spiritually awake, but now you're like, maybe you're still caught up in some addiction, or you're caught up in some, I have to do this because people expect it of me, whatever it is. And so all of this just came. I wrote it out in 2020, actually about a week after the lockdown began.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
I went, stood at my computer, typed it out, finished the book, put it on a shelf for 2 years, and just let it sit there. And then things started happening. Now it's published. It's on Amazon, wherever. And it's just a practical guide to spiritual awakening. It's just about raw and real. The first thing I say in the book is I'm not a scholar. I'm not trying to expound upon some discourse. I'm just trying to say this is my experience and this is what happened and what worked for me. So
that's the best we can all do, honestly.
Yes.
To explain. That's what we're doing literally right in this conversation, is just explaining our own viewpoint. And we can't do it for anybody else. We can just explain our example of how it worked for us, and maybe it'll plant the seed in somebody else. But I think the important thing for everyone to realize is too, that my journey, your journey, anybody else's journey to this quote unquote spiritual awakening is going to be very different, because we all have different karma and we all have different circumstances that we were born into. But there can be similarities. There's definitely similarities, but there's also a lot of differences as well. So it's good to just keep that in mind.
Absolutely. One of the things I say all the time is everyone's spiritual awakening is going to look different. If you try to emulate someone else's awakening, like you said, there could be some similarities, but if you try to emulate it from start to finish, you're going to get lost in there and say it's like a diet. Diets don't work for everybody because something is different.
Very true. So how would you explain how you are different from before and after this this enlightening experience of yours? What, to an outside point of view, how do you act different? How do you serve differently in this world?
Everything is, I feel like everything comes from my heart. It's like a flow. Just always being in the flow. And that doesn't mean every circumstance plays out into my favor, which I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding from some people to think spiritual awakening means you're going to get everything you want. And that's really, for some people, it's the opposite. Some people have a spiritual awakening and go live in a cave or something. So
yeah,
it's however circumstances are playing out, I'm always just viewing it from here, and the mind is quiet. The mind went quiet.
Just compassionately witnessing whatever happens to the best of your extent.
That's it. And of course, that raises many other questions with especially when I do TikTok lives. People say, okay, so what if someone breaks into your bus in the middle of the night? Do you just sit there and watch them? I say, no, I get up and beat their ass. But you're still not doing it from the mind, much in a way that if you're walking down the street and there's a woman holding a baby out a second-story window and the house is on fire and she says, help, you don't stop and say, let me figure out if I should help or not. Let me try to calculate.
Yeah.
Your soul takes over and you run and catch the baby. And then when the news says you're a hero, you're like, I was just there. And so, sure, if somebody breaks in my bus, I'm a very kind of unique individual. I actually may talk to them and say, hey, what are you doing? That's kind of my personality, if we want to call it that. But you're not just allowing things to happen. Sure, a lot of stuff you are allowing to happen because it's meaningless to get involved into it. You're just watching the whole thing unfold. And then when something moves your energy, not because a thought tells you you better stand up for yourself or you better, get even with someone, but when something moves your energy, it's moving you. You're still just the witness of it moving you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that flow.
So that would be the biggest the difference. Anxiety dropped, depression dropped, addiction just dropped. That's what fascinated me so much. I was, one of the biggest addictions I had then was adult content. It's like I was just, and this was in 2000, so internet was somewhat new.
Yeah.
And I had this computer where suddenly I'm not looking at limited magazines anymore. Now I have the entire world to view.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
And it's not even to say that it's wrong. It's not even to say looking at images is wrong. We're curious people, of course. We're having a human experience. But I was addicted. I was 4 hours a day, 8 hours a day, missing work.
Damn.
And literally when this shift took place, I think 4 days later, I was like looking at the computer going, oh yeah, I used to just sit there. It was just like gone. It's like how people say losing your mind. It's like you're losing the part of your mind that never served you any purpose in the first place.
Yeah.
And all we have to do is, like you said, there's a glimpse. Stay with that glimpse.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Stay with the glimpse. That's the hardest part, man.
It is.
It's simple though, because there's nothing that we have to technically do. We glimpse, the ironic thing is we glimpse into, oh, I was this the whole time. And then we go, we go back. And then it's always, for me, it's this constant remembrance. It's like, oh, of course, I was this flow the whole time, part of this process the whole time. And then we go back. I mean, it's always there. It's just hidden in plain sight. What hides it, you think? Our desires? You think our desires are really what take us away from that constant connectivity?
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it is. I think it is the desires. Like the Buddha said. Desire is suffering, and I think it's the desire that arises. And the second aspect to it is that it steals our focus. It steals our attention from just being here to suddenly we're in the mind.
Yeah, I gotta be there. Or I gotta be this. Or be
Yes.
somebody. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then if there's a third phase, the third phase is putting what was in the mind into action.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's drinking beer, and again, there's nothing wrong with drinking, until there's a problem. But it's like you have the thought about the beer, but you still have to put it into action. So you still have a chance, even with addiction, that people say, all I do is just sit and think about drinking all day, but you don't have to put it into action.
That's a good point. Wow. I never really thought of it like that. Yeah, there's the actual desire, and then there's quelling the desire. Well, first you have to become aware of the desire. That's the first step. Yeah, man.
That's it.
That's a good point.
What you just said is golden, because the problem with most of the world is they're just not simply aware that they are chasing these desires. They think they are the desires. They think that's their identity.
Yeah, damn. The Buddha had it figured out thousands of years ago.
100%.
Wow, he knew this before the age. We're living in the age of desire. We're living in the age of ego, where it's so rampant. It's like we need the Buddha and yogic teachings ever more so now. And they
Yeah,
figured it out for us thousands of years ago, lifetimes ago, and it still holds true. The four noble truths they're even more noble nowadays. It's
they are.
wild.
Yeah, the Buddha is epic. And think about it this way, how there was not almost any temptation during his time, like there is
Not like
now.
we have now. Yeah, we have like instant temptation. We have just there's temptation at every corner. It's
Yeah.
wild. Damn. Especially in America in the Western world.
Oh, definitely.
Damn, man.
Yeah, and I feel like that, and this is always the disclaimer I want to give everybody. I always say, now listen, it's not that we're trying to be monks and nuns here, but if you can have your human experience from here, it's a whole different experience. So even if you are dabbling in something, and the thing is if it doesn't work out, you've not left your home. You're still complete if it doesn't work out. For most people, if that Tinder date doesn't work out, they're devastated.
That's the suffering. Yep, exactly. Yeah, makes sense. Hmm. I like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. We summed it up pretty well there, man. That's the gist of it. It's so simple, isn't it? It's so
It
simple when
is.
when you analyze it rationally. It's just like, oh, yeah, of course, it makes sense. But
It
let's
is
not on
very
that.
simple.
We weren't taught that in school. That's the problem.
That's the I talk about that all the time, and I feel like I'm not really much of a conspiracy theorist, but this information is known to people who create schools, and it's known to certain levels of society that they purposefully keep it hidden.
Mm,
Because
yeah, we're
if you
going
wake
down the
up to
rabbit hole now.
yes, for sure. Um, it's not. And now, would we say the teachers of the school in my town? Of course not, because they're just following the system. Some of them may have had a spiritual awakening, but there's nothing they can do. They can't change the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this stuff was set in place, even here in America. It was set in place hundreds of years ago.
Mm-hmm. From secret societies.
Because of my symbol, sometimes people ask me, they say, "Are you Illuminati?" And I said, "No, that just represents being the observer." But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that certainly there were some secret closed societies that knew how to manipulate the rest of society. Could have been with good intentions, even,
Yeah.
but it goes astray.
Mm. Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel it. I think there is too. I mean, it's just the question is like how much control is there? Is all of this control, like all the media, all the information that we see on here, the
Mm,
YouTube algorithm, is it go that deep? Are they in the also the education system? Are they in our food? Like, there's so many different layers to that, but there is some essence of control. It's not all just a free for all here. I don't think. I don't
yeah,
think.
yeah. No, I agree.
That goes
Yeah,
beyond the government is what we're saying, right? It's not just like government control. There's
right.
people that are playing the chess game of life behind the scenes, and we don't know their name, we don't know where they're from, and they're influencing and probably have been influencing us for hundreds of years. And the biggest thing they're keeping from us and controlling, we're saying, is our true identity, and that is a
Hmm.
crime against humanity. That is, I don't know. It could be looked at as a crime against humanity, but then sometimes I think like maybe that's part of this process, this game of life. Is like we have to find that out ourselves. I'm
That's right.
I don't know, man. It's tough. It's hard to say. Should we all know the truth? It wouldn't, even if we were told that's the thing. This is what we're talking about. If we knew the truth, quote unquote, how would we all know it? Would we be learning it in school? Is it that easy? I don't know if it's that easy. If you just like take a curriculum on your true self, I don't know. Like, how do you go about building a society that is completely aligned with God? I
Right.
don't have the answer for that. I think it's pretty complicated because for people like you, it happened just by a stroke of grace. You know, you
Mm.
didn't necessarily, you did afterwards, but you got the glimpse, but then you decided to pursue that and have a practice. So like what pursuit does our society have to go down to be able to be on that wavelength? I have no idea. Maybe a lot more meditation, maybe just guidance into that.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you could do it for sure, you know?
Yeah. Maybe a little bit of everything that is, slow everything down a bit. And, speaking of, the government might even be the smallest part of it because people think it's the government. It could be the smallest part of it because one vision that I had back at the 2020 election. No. Yes, maybe. 2016 election, maybe. But one vision that I had, because there was all this talk about manipulating votes, I meditated on that. And what I am a visionary, and the vision that I got was this. There was accusations about tampering with voting, and here's the easy way to tamper with voting. Let's use Facebook as an example. Facebook has the ability to show you something or to remove it from you seeing it. So if one candidate creates an ad or something, Facebook has the ability to show you that and avoid the other candidate. This is all totally possible, and it's actually happening with all types of advertisement, and political campaigns are advertisements. So
Yep.
can that sway if there is an election, and I'm not a politics person at all, but if there's an election that's like 51-49, of course a platform like Facebook can sway that within a year. Of course they can. So that's more powerful than even the government. But we all have the power to be aware and to not get pulled into whatever tactic that the government or Facebook or anybody's using. Um,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's like a mental revolution, and that's the true revolution. It's the revolution within to be able to have that viewpoint because nothing can really sway you one way or the other from God once you realize what God is.
that's it.
Yeah, that's true
Or
power. I think that is the ultimate truth that there might be people that don't want us to know that. There's got to be, man. you
yeah,
know,
it's
good.
kind of like I can come onto this podcast and every other comment I make could be about your shirt or something. I can derail this podcast in a way that doesn't seem like I'm derailing the podcast. And what that does is it takes this conscious uh, um, dialogue between us and it dilutes it. And I think that is what the world is doing. It's diluting everything
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
by little, but they're doing it in such a subtle way. But instead of talking about shirts and things like that, we're getting so deep into it. And that is why, I watched some of your podcasts and I was like, exactly. I just kept saying exactly.
mm.
And why? Because what is in this age of awakening, if we can even call it that, what's happening is people like you, people like me, are speaking their truth, and it's not chunked with this bullshit. It's just here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not fear-based. It's not, okay, so listen to us today or you're going to suffer so bad in your life.
Yeah, it's not preaching.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah, man. It's genuine. I mean, we're just having a conversation. We're just having some fun.
Yeah.
It's genuine. We try to be authentic at least.
Yeah.
You can't hide the real. Hmm.
Statistically, the Christian religion has plummeted in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Um,
But I think the true teachings of Christ has risen.
it has accelerated. It has accelerated because we could put all you need to know about Jesus's message on one piece of paper.
Yeah. If you could sum it up in one sentence or maybe two sentences, what would you say his message truly was?
To discover who you really are, the kingdom of God is within, which means God is within. It means everything is within. That when you spend all your time chasing outwardly, you do it in vain. Only when you're living from this space can you really enjoy eating fruit or traveling to Costa Rica or even connecting physically with someone. Then you are living from this space. I made a video many years ago and put it on here on YouTube. And it was called, Are You Having Sex with the Voices in Your Head?
Mm-hmm.
So two people come together, and if one person is thinking the whole time, do I look right? Is my fat roll showing? Maybe we can dim the lights. Am I perform? They're not having sex with their partner. They're having sex with the voices in their head.
Interesting.
So whenever we discover this Christ consciousness, everything, it's a true awakening. Eating, living, working, playing, raising children, connecting with our partners, traveling, or whatever, raising reptiles, whatever is your thing. So I knew I drew that out a little bit, but to get back to it is the simple teaching of Jesus is surrender to the Christ consciousness that's within you.
Mm-hmm. Which is know thyself, and then that's know thyself, and then serve thyself. I don't know. I guess just knowing thyself is the most important thing.
Yeah, because it's not a knowing here. It's an experience, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And if we wanted to tack on just a couple more little things, judge not, least you be judged, because judgment is like a boomerang. It just creates the patterns in your mind and the filters that now you are viewing the world fat, skinny, black, white. That's how you're viewing the world. So how it comes back karmically is because you're not seeing reality for what it is, and you will suffer by those filters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as above, so below, and that works with others because you realize that there are truly no others. So there is this almost constant telepathy that we have. So anything, all the words and stuff that we tell ourselves about other people to ourselves, it is a reflection of us in one way or the other. Like you said, it's the boomerang that comes back to us because there is no separation at all. That's the biggest thing is there may be a perceived separation of the air, time, and space. But literally, right now, me and you, man, me and you, and whoever's listening or watching, there actually is no separation. It's just an illusion. We are connected telepathically at this moment. Even though it's a different moment, it's really not a different moment. It's all this one moment, and we're all connected in this. So, yes, it's important to be in this moment and be mindful of what we're thinking and how our mind is working in this moment because my mind is your mind is my mind essentially. Right,
Yeah,
that's the whole gist of it, man. That's the consciousness. And yeah, we need to change how we think, and that's the Christ consciousness, man. Knowing thyself, knowing thy mind, and then changing thy mind and becoming the best mind possible.
yeah, absolutely. It's the quantum field. It's everything is now. And you know, speaking of Jesus, so when I left Christianity, really interesting story. When I left Christianity after my spiritual awakening, uh Jesus grew in my heart. It was so interesting how it expanded. And I started studying Buddhism, and I tell the story sometimes, and if I tell it to Christians, they sometimes get mad at me. But I said I found the real Jesus through Buddhism
Hmm.
because I shook away all of the stuff I was taught that's not in alignment with Jesus. And when I discovered this meditation and this, like you said, Four Noble Truths and everything, I discovered. And then I started reading books like the Zen Teachings of Jesus, things like that. And it was just like,
Hmm. Hmm. Because the truth is the truth. It's interesting when you said that you say that to Christians and they don't believe it. It's
yeah,
because they're not really Christians, man. They just call themselves Christians. It's just like a dogmatic way of viewing Christianity, which is the complete opposite of Christianity. An
yes,
outward idol bowing down, Jesus would be like, "What are you doing? If, what are you people doing? Seriously, this isn't what I was teaching." But
yeah,
it's the popular cult like narrative that we live in nowadays. And it's interesting that you Buddha woke you up to that, or at least you saw Christ's teachings in Buddhism, because yeah, they're kind of all the same. But Buddha teaches. I think his teachings, the concept of popular Buddhism is more aligned with what we're talking about, the truth, capital T.
yeah.
Um, but he would say the same thing. He does say the same thing. It's inside of you, but there's still that outward dogma in a way to Buddhism. Not so much as Christianity, but there is still that outward. You could get sucked into venerating him, as I have him on my wall right here, which is kind of funny. You could get sucked into venerating the outward idol of Siddhartha Gautama as well. So you just got to know where to draw the line at the dogma and know that it is dogma and it's just guidance from however, if it's in the Bible, if it's in the suttas, or anywhere else. It's all just guidance for us. And that's the gist, man. Yeah.
That's it. That's perfectly said. I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, it's, um, I have, I actually have an image of the Buddha and love that image. Probably my favorite image that I have is of Ramana Maharshi, who was a sage from India. And um, do I worship this image? No, but the connection that comes through this image, it's very powerful. And so um, if my bus something happens to my bus and I lose that, I still don't lose this awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's what matters.
uh, yeah, exactly. And so, I always tell people follow whatever intricate path feels good to you. Just stay as the awareness as you're unfolding the path. And then you see the truth of that path, whether it's Christianity or Buddhism or even atheism. Just, if you say, like, I surrender to the universe or whatever.
Yeah, that's a huge aspect of the path is surrender. To just kind of realize that you're not 100, whatever you think you are, you're not 100% in control. There is some kind of, we're not 100%, how do I put this, man? There's some kind of flow here, like we talked about, right? So you got to go with that. That flow is what we're in. So we are the flow as well. So you have to surrender to that. Float
Yeah.
downstream. There is, or no, if you don't, and that flow is not going with our desires. Recognizing how to flow. There's a skill in that. That's what being a yogi is realizing how to flow, and then
Yeah.
from there, um, yeah, you have to surrender to not, how do I put this, man? Not thinking you have it figured out, not thinking that you are self-important, to know that there is a greater locus of control that you're in. There's a great controller to this game. There is this, God is in you, right? So I'm kind of all over the
Yeah.
place right now. God is in us. We are 100% a piece of God, the totality, but there's also the greater sphere of God. Like we are 100% God, but God is not 100% a human being.
Right.
So with that ideal, you recognize how to flow with that almost other entity, even though it's really not an other entity. It is like another aspect. It's just part of this process. It's knowing how to flow with this whole process, this game of being a human being, and that's the path to peace, man.
Yeah. I think we're all God droplets in the God ocean.
Mm-hmm. That's what it
And
is.
you know, you were speaking a minute ago about having a hard time speaking about it. It's because, ultimately through our language, we're always going to reach this wall that we can only go through the wall in silence. You almost can't go through the wall with words because the words won't fit. But we try.
Yep. Yeah, we try. We can get, we can get there, get hints of it in our speech, but once we talk, it automatically doesn't do it justice, which is the ironic thing that we have a podcast talking about it, because it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense truly. It's
Yeah.
really just, it doesn't make any sense. Like, we once we say something, automatically it it gets rid of the truth, I guess you could say. Automatically, right from the get-go, it's not the truth, and the truth is truly found in silence. Like you said, there is, you just have to be able to silence the mind in order to have this experience and remind ourselves of our godliness. Yeah, man. But I think
Yeah.
that what words do, sorry, can I just say this real quick? What words
Yes.
do is act as a guide. They can act as a guide to that, and that's the closest thing we got.
I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. This podcast is like a bridge. It's a bridge because if you just go knocking on people's door saying meditate, it's like then they're going to have 20 questions. Well, what is meditation? Why should I meditate? And so, things like this podcast or books or whatever, they're like bridges. We shouldn't stop on the bridge, but the bridge is so helpful to get to the other side of understanding so that you have your own direct experience.
Yeah, 100%, man. Mm-hmm. Now, were you a Christian before this? In the popular sense.
Yeah, in the popular sense, I was. When I had my spiritual awakening at 8 years old, I had attended a couple, Bible schools or something, but it was nothing serious. It's not like my family was. My parents wouldn't go to church; they would just make me and my sister go to church, and so it was just like an event. And then when I became an adult and was suffering from all this, addiction and everything, anxiety, I tried many different churches because I thought the only answer would be to find God through church. And I was very open about it. I was not sarcastic or cynical about it. I was just very open, almost innocent, and just kept finding these things that were being spoken and taught that just felt so dark to me. And so, yes, probably, I was more or less, my dad was an atheist, but my mom was a Christian, and we were more or less raised Christian. And until I had my awakening in 2000. And I say I left Christianity, but again, it's not like Jesus opened up in my heart space more than it was before. So, um, but I was definitely taught the dogma for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, I was an atheist as well, but I still am an atheist to the dogma. And I think that's the
Yes.
first step. Is like we just, you have to realize that ain't the way, and then realize what the way is. So I think atheism is like, you're halfway there. You're almost
Yeah.
there. Keep going. Yeah, their idea of God, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Keep going though, because I was a adamant atheist, man. Like, rational. If you talked about God, I would automatically think you're a dumbass. There is no way that there is a God. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I can't see it. There's no God. Prove it to me. That's what I would say. Like, prove it to me.
Yeah.
And obviously, you can't prove it to somebody. So I was halfway there. I had to prove it to myself.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
gist.
Someone emailed me about a year ago. I do some free courses on spiritual awakening, kind of like this podcast. It's just a bridge, but someone emailed me and said, I've been an atheist my whole life. Will I be able to do this course? I said, probably way better than most people,
Mm-hmm.
because atheism is probably the best place to start.
I agree. Yeah, it's like a blank slate.
Yes.
Hmm.
When you have so much unprogramming to do,
Yeah.
it can get in the way. But most people who are atheist, and I tell people this, you should be skeptical. You should be
Yeah.
skeptical.
Mm-hmm. It's not too much.
'Cause that,
Keep that curiosity though. There has to be always that hint of curiosity because nobody has it figured out, and that's what
yeah,
atheism is. It's saying, "Oh, dude, you don't know. Like, I'm not gonna believe your word about God." But there's still you still have to have that hint. That's not the end point. Don't get caught on the bridge. Actually, no. I think atheism can also be taken the other way. Like you could get
mhm,
caught in that as a dogma. That
you
also
can.
could be a very firm dogma in somebody's mind. So it depends on the person and the circumstances.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I agree with that. It's really just getting caught up in your own mind,
Yeah.
and that's why the subtitle. One of I have two subtitles, but one of the subtitles of my book is "Get Out of Your Head and Into Your Heart." It's about experiencing this life and not analyzing, thinking your whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and that's scary for most people
Yeah. Why do you think that's scary?
because people have themselves convinced that if they work it out in their mind, then it manifests into reality. And a lot of times it does. If you go to a job, you do get the paycheck on Friday. So you manifest that. But then this is what always happens. And this is what usually sparks spiritual awakening. And I knew a guy that this happened. He worked 20 years for a factory here in this town. He went to work one day and the doors were locked up. He was getting ready to retire the next month and draw a pension. Factory shut down. Lost his 20-year pension, everything.
Oh, that's messed up.
So, or you come home and your wife is in bed with somebody else, or your husband. It's something like that. So people are scared because they have convinced themselves, I've got this figured out and everything's working. But as soon as that comes down, then they have to start searching for God, the universe, answers. So
Yeah, I got you. And the thing is, it always comes down, no matter what, no matter whatever the situation that you just described is. Eventually, it's going to come to pass. All of this is temporary. That's the
yeah,
ultimate truth. Another ultimate truth is that all of this is temporary. We try to latch on to narratives within our head that we tell ourselves are some kind of permanent um, peace, not even peace, but some permanent essence in our life, a sense of stability, but it's really not. It's just built on another facade of the mind. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. All that so well said. So it's like a rediscovery. I like to call it investigation. Investigate who you are and what this life is,
Mm-hmm.
and see what you find.
Mm-hmm. I'm still figuring it out too. I'm still discovering things every day that goes by.
After I had my really big shift, I won't say that I'm not still figuring things out, but after I had that big shift, it's like all of the analyzation and everything just was gone, and I'm still fascinated by it because if I wish I had, like a weight loss video, how someone starts off one size and then they record all these videos and make this little documentary out of it and you watch it and you get inspired to lose weight. I wish I had some footage from who I was in 1994 or 1998, living in a roadside hotel, getting drunk and like just living this waste and believing myself to not be good enough, and I'm a sinner, and because I'm a sinner I'm never going to be worthy. It just, all of this was just like this sludge, and how to go from that to just being free. it's I'm fascinated every day by it.
Yeah, and I like what you said. It's not so much analytical. Like you don't analyze it. You're still fascinated by it.
Yes.
Big difference between that. We're still like there's not it's not an end. Like you haven't reached the end just because you came to this new glimpse of how you see yourself. If anything, it makes it even more beautiful that when you get rid of the analyzation and trying to be something you're not and truly surrendering, like we talked about, it provides a sense of beauty, a sense of peace in whatever happens in life, and a sense of contentment and joy. And no matter what happens, even if there is physical, emotional suffering, there is still in the back of my mind that compassionate witness to the happenings of this life. And it never leaves me. I don't think it will ever leave you. Will this viewpoint of yourself ever leave you?
I don't feel like it's possible, because it's like something gets burned out. It's almost like, if you have an electrical cord and it catches fire and it burns the wire and all that's left is the metal, it's like, can it just reform the insulation around it? No, it's like it's but also, I can't honestly say that I know. Uh just that I've been in this space for a very long time, many years, and things come into my field of awareness, things such as anger and things like that. It comes into my field of awareness, but instead of like it's here and I'm forced to just act out the anger, it's like over here, like somebody's whispering and you just
Mm,
don't take it seriously anymore. It's like
mm,
it arises, you observe it, and you don't act it out and it just dissipates. And I know I'm making it sound very easy. I did go through a time where I was very challenged. I was awake, but how do I deal with this stuff? You just don't fight it. You don't give it energy. You don't give it power. You don't resist it. You just watch it.
yeah. It's not easy. It's simple, like we said.
Yes.
It's a fine line. And I,
Yes.
and I like what you said too about how you just don't take it so seriously. I think the path is it's not that you don't take your life not seriously at all. It's just figuring out what to take seriously. It's a reorientation toward what to focus on, where your energy goes. And then from there, yeah, that's you change, and you change your whole entire world, your whole entire universe. And
Yeah.
hopefully it's a change for the better toward peace. That's ideally what it should be for.
Yeah. I like your word. Yes. I like your word reorientation. Perfect word. You're just reorienting yourself. Um, and I agree. It's like any other experiment. What is the outcome? If the outcome is I think twice as much as I did before, well, then that's not the way. If the outcome is peace, if the outcome, slows down your road rage and slows down your, maybe you work 14 hours a day and don't spend time with your family and you're driven by money so you could have 4 cars. Maybe it slows some of that down and it creates this openness and this flexibility in your life. Then you're on the right path.
Mm-hmm. What are some practices that you would recommend to people in order to stay aligned?
Um, in the back of my book, I have 10 practices listed, and it was a stretch for 10. And I would not recommend somebody practicing like all 10 of them. It'd just be too much. But um, I have a 30-day meditation course. Meditation would be my number one practice that I would recommend to people. Um, if someone
Simple pranayama, focusing on the breath.
focusing on the breath and then into the spaciousness of awareness. Yes, the breath, there will never be nothing better because your breath breathes into the heart space and out of the heart space.
Yeah.
Um, and so meditation, prayer, if someone is used to praying, creating a new type of prayer, not a prayer of want, but a prayer of it's already here.
Gratitude.
Yeah, prayer of gratitude. Um, there's other things that a lot of yogis use, like mantras and things like that. I used a mantra for a while, and that mantra was, that's not true. That was my simple, nothing fancy about it. But when this thought would arise, this anxiety would arise, something would arise, I would observe it and I would say, that's not true. It's just a program in my mind. And, but definitely the main one would be meditation, whether it's stillness or mindfulness meditation, whatever it resonates with the person.
I agree. And I agree because it's like in a practical standpoint, what is meditation? What do we do during meditation? A lot of people think it's just you close the eyes and you breathe and you just sit there, but it's actually a process and almost a skill to what meditation is. So if I can explain that real quick, it's working with the breath. It's like you're you have your hustle and bustle of your mind, the monkey mind, you breathe, you come back into the breath. There's that awareness. And then eventually, inevitably, the monkey mind, you breathe, come back into the breath. And maybe a 10 count breath, whatever you're doing. There's different techniques. But it's that training the mind to be able to come back into that awareness, right? Literally rewiring our brain to be able to have that anchor of the breath, which we're always breathing. Doesn't matter where we are or who we are, we're all breathing. So if we
Yeah.
can reorient ourselves into the breath in a simple meditation session, we can do that literally anywhere. And it doesn't have to be the breath, but it's the most simplest way to anchor ourselves into the moment. So it's literally how I see it, rewiring our brain to have that awareness no matter where we are, to have that skill of coming into the moment no matter where we are. And the breath is the most functional way to be able to do that. It's really simple. I think we've
Yeah.
said that a lot in this conversation. It is quite simple, the
Yeah.
technique of meditation.
I totally bow to that explanation of meditation.
Right? It's just that it allows us to come back into the awareness. And that's what the most important part is. It's not the actual meditation aspect of it. I think truly the meditation is like a training for us to be able to make our lives that meditation and have that awareness when we go into the world and serve others in the world and doing whatever we're doing, to be able to have that awareness. Because if we can come to that awareness when somebody cuts us off in traffic or whatever happens in our life, if we can have that awareness, then that's when we can have the discernment. And when we have that discernment, that's when we can act in a way that is better for ourselves in the world. And thus, we create either good karma or no karma at all. We get out of the loop. That's the whole process that we're going through. It's the
Yeah.
awareness, the discernment, and then from the discernment, we act. And we either act in a way that's sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. Ideally, we want to be sattvic in all of our actions, which is like pure, I guess you could say, putting it
Yeah.
simply. So that's the process, man. It's really simple, and it is a science. When you can outline it like that, it is a science. Like yoga and the whole philosophy and lifestyle of yoga is a science. It's the holy science, as Sri Yukteswar calls it in his book. It
Yeah.
truly, it truly is, man. And the science is explained in many different ways: Buddhism, Christianity, um, any beliefs. There's plenty of other philosophical belief systems. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. There's many different ways, many
Yeah.
different labels on the truth, but it's all this reorientation process, a restructuring of how we see ourselves and a restructuring of how we act. And then from there, ideally, we don't suffer and we find peace.
Absolutely. I've actually read the Holy Science, and very powerful.
Very thick, like it's very it's not for the lighthearted. It's not a yoga 101 book, you know.
Exactly. There's a chapter in my book. It's called The Preacher, the Scientist, and the Yogi. And basically what it's about is what you just said. It's like the preacher denies science and only focuses on spirituality. Often the scientist denies spirituality and only focuses on science. And yoga combines the two. It's very powerful. And of course, I'm speaking stereotypically, um, but and that is where my life and my work in this has come from. It's a connection between the spiritual, yes, a heavy dose of skepticism, leaning towards science and finding the balance of all of that together.
Exactly. It's a good way to put it. Hmm. How would you describe yoga simply to somebody that just thinks it's, some kind of physical exercise?
The first thing I always say is yoga's not just about exercise. I say it's kind of like 1/8 exercise. But
Yeah, literally in the eight limbs. It is
yeah,
1/8.
uh, I always say that yoga. This I like to put it in the most real terms possible. I say yoga is where your body is in unison with your mind, and both of them are being observed and in the flow with your spirit. It's just like, and it's when those things get out of line. Your mind says, I want to keep eating donuts, but then your body's rejecting it, and which creates issues with the body. So it's putting it all into this union, this alignment.
I see. Yeah. It's all connected. The body and the mind is connected. There's no separation from the neck up or down. It's literally, this is the temple. We have to
Yes.
take care of the temple. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, good explanation. Man. Yeah. Do you think yoga or just meditation, uh, or just maybe self-inquiry, just an aspect of diving into our being, I guess you could say, in one way or the other, spiritualism is a part of being human? Like, you think there's an aspect of just simply being a human of spirituality that we're lacking, like true spirituality? Do you think we're lacking that in today's world? Like, not talking about going to church on Sunday or, having the dogma. Like, actually talking about what we're referencing in this whole entire conversation. Do you think that's just natural to be a human being and we just kind of lost that essence?
I do. I do feel that way. But I do feel like that something is definitely waking up, let's just say in the past 10 years or even 5 years. It's like accelerating, that people are fed up with being controlled, whether it's being controlled by themselves or money or parents or spouse or jobs or, society. People are just getting fed up with it. And Ramana Maharshi, probably my favorite quote of his, was someone once asked him, why is there so much suffering in the world? And he said, because people have not had enough of it yet.
That's good.
And it really is, because the moment we're fed up with it, when sometimes someone will message with me, they say, Billy, I'm just done. I'm done. I'm done. I say, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. And they're like, how is that awesome? I said, because now you have the energy to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think that for I think it's been an ebb and flow throughout the human history that, something rises up. The Buddha comes and all these people wake up, and it rises and then it kind of falls back into slumber. And I think we're in a wave of awakening, and spiritual books, I look at statistics sometimes. I'm kind of curious in that aspect. Spiritual books are being sold at a all-time rate, and not just because the population of the world went up, but spirituality, self-help, and yet actual established churches attendance is going down. It's people are waking up and they're saying, what is the actual truth?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
they're on that search.
Something's going on in the world, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you think that we will have a world completely ridden of suffering someday, or is there a place for our suffering, like Ramana Maharshi said? You know, good. Is suffering our catalyst into this awakening? So we almost need to have it rough. We need to have a little bit of darkness in order to be able to get that glimpse of light.
I think you just said it perfectly. And I don't think we will ever, even if we create a new earth where there's abundance and love and connection, there will still be pockets of suffering. And the suffering is a catalyst to drive us deeper into who we really are.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, to know that the suffering is also part of this perfection. That's a tough pill to swallow, but it's yeah, you can't unsee that. Like it makes sense. It kind of makes
Yes.
sense. Hmm.
It is a tough pill to swallow, especially when somebody approaches you and says, I was abused severely as a child, so that was just for me to wake up. And there's no, in all the love and compassion I have for people, there's no answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't just tell somebody that. It's not that easy, but it actually might be the truth.
Right.
It actually might have been for you to wake up and try to find another way, but
Yes.
you can't just say that. It's not that
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah. I look at my own suffering, even my abuse as a child. One story I tell all the time is when I was 14, my mom was uh, dating this guy who woke up one morning and decided to punch me in the face. Um, and he was a big guy. He was a Green Beret in the military. And that was very traumatizing to me. And I mean, he knocked me out. I woke up, I had peed on myself. You can imagine when you're 14, you're trying to be a man, and I was humiliated. But I look now from this space onto that memory and understand it's just a play of consciousness. But if someone would have told me that a week after it happened, it would have been very hurtful to hear them say that, right?
Hmm. I think it's even harder to convince oneself of the suffering that it's part of the play. We can talk about it now, but I don't know about you. I'm not suffering right now. I don't
Right.
feel like I'm suffering, but when we're
Yes,
actually in the thick of it, that's when the true test comes. The true test of your faith to this process. But
absolutely.
it's all a test. I think we're tested every day. We don't know
Yeah,
how our tests are going to go, but it's all a test of our faith to this connection to the divine, which is essentially a connection to our true self. It's all a test.
yeah.
And yeah, man, that's why we have the practices so we can pass the test.
I I think you're speaking things that I say all the time, and because people say, "Do you have to have practices?" I say, "No, you don't have to have practices. If you can just poof, wake up, and grace pulls you in the rest of the way, there's nothing to practice."
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are a few teachers that have had that experience and then teach that you don't have to do anything. And then people sit there and they just keep suffering. And so I try to find a balance with that because I feel like for most people, you do need the practices. You need to keep taking one step across that bridge. And that's what the practice is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. The middle way.
Yes.
Seriously. Well, man, honestly, I think we could probably wrap this thing up. I don't have anything else I want to inquire on, but if you have any last words, feel free.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me to your podcast. I think it's, like I said, it's a wonderful bridge for people to connect and resonate with something, and it might spawn them to go and study this or study that. So it may begin a long journey for them, or it could be wrapping up the journey they've already been on.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
the only other thing I would say is throughout the process, don't judge yourself, love yourself, whoever's listening, because if you carry that into your spiritual journey with you, you're going to taint everything else along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So if it all boils down to you saying, I don't understand anything these guys are talking about, then just simply practice loving yourself. Don't judge yourself. Don't judge other people and see what emerges from that love.
Amen. Amen. It's all about the love. Love is the
Yeah.
way. Well, other than that, man, appreciate you. Appreciate anybody that listened. Namaste.
Namaste.